Hello, and a warm welcome, everyone, to the latest episode of the AI Edge podcast, presented by Leena AI. Joining us today as a guest, we have Mr. Cameron Turner, a VP of Data and AI at Valtech and a GP for Oxonian Ventures. Welcome, Cameron, and thank you so much for doing this with me.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Adi. It's great to be here.
To start us off, can you tell me a little more about your role at Valtech? First of all, what does Valtech do, your role at Valtech, and maybe a little more about Oxonian Ventures as well?
Yeah, you bet. Valtech is a global consultancy. We're focused on digital transformation. We typically work with Global 1000 companies. We're headquartered in the EU, UK, and US. My role is leading the data and AI practice here. And so we have folks all over the world building AI solutions for our clients. And I still get to get down in the trenches with my team and even do some coding sometimes. So very much get to see what companies are trying out when it comes to AI and Gen AI these days.
That's amazing, Cameron. And can you start us right off by telling us a few use cases, practical implementations or use cases that you've actually worked on with customers of yours, maybe specific industry use cases or specific customer use cases that you see and you actually implemented and there's value that customers have received?
Yeah, well, it's a really exciting time right now in AI. I think, as everyone knows, the headlines are stuffed full of updates and announcements around ChatGPT and what you can do with generative AI and what you can do with your data and expose that for your customers, for your employees, and so forth. So we're seeing a lot of sort of an awakening where AI projects, I've been doing this kind of work for 25 years now, and starting, people talk about agentic models and agents and chatbots. One of my first jobs was working on the much hated Clippy system inside of Microsoft Office and interpreting what people were typing in to Clippy and trying to get good answers back to them. So there was kind of a team of engineers behind the scenes doing Wizard of Oz, where there really was no AI, built into that, to what we have today, which is fully autonomous AI systems that are learning and have memory and can correct each other and all kinds of great things. In terms of use cases, one of the things that's great about AI today is that it's accessible. It's not the domain of just the IT department or just the development team. It's something that every executive at every Fortune 500 company and Global 1000 company is thinking about and has ideas about how to implement. And their intuition usually is not wrong. Sometimes, they think they want Gen AI or AI, and they actually need good old machine learning or even a deterministic model to do something. But everyone understands the opportunity, and I think that's something that's super exciting. So we see use cases in marketing for doing highly personalized content. We see uses in finance focusing on categorization of fraud, and then lots and lots of information retrieval scenarios. How can I talk to my data? How can I know the history of an ad campaign? How can I generate new advertising copy or new product descriptions? How can I translate that into 39 languages? This is where the market is right now, is really, hey, I've got sort of this historical asset of data as an organization. How do I convert that into value?
That's amazing, Cameron. So we're actually seeing a lot of those use cases ourselves at Leena that, hey, here are 100 million knowledge articles and data points in SharePoint. Now, I want the marketing team to be able to access that and create something really fast, right? So it's in sense retrieval and then generation put together and retrieval specific to the organization, right? So one of the challenges I've seen a lot of our customers face, Cameron, I'd love to hear your take on this, is the cleanliness of the data itself, right? So you have the same knowledge from 15 years ago, 5 years ago, and then today, right? So it's all overlapping, and it's basically does not yield good results. So it's a garbage in, garbage out problem. Have you seen those problems with your customers? And if yes, how would you guide our listeners? Because I'm telling you, everyone's working on something like this today, right? So how do you guide them to solve that problem?
Yeah, you touched a nerve for me, Adi, because this is something that it comes up in every conversation, and it's the number one roadblock for doing consulting work, which is what my job is. There's usually a moment after an initial conversation about opportunity where someone will say, our data is just not ready. Like, we're not like other organizations that have all their data clean and in place and historical and scrubbed up and ready to go to build AI systems. So we're going to have to take a year to do that, and we'll call you later, which is not a great thing to hear when you want to get to work. And so I think that the secret is that everyone has a messy closet when it comes to their data assets. And actually, the more successful you are, the more dirty your data is going to get. So we've worked with, for example, one of the two largest beverage companies in the U.S. And for them, they've got 13 different brands that they manage, and they're always acquiring more. And that acquisition process means you have really challenging time answering basic questions, like the CEO wants to know how many customers the company has. It sounds like a simple question. That's a really complicated question when you start to think about all the data systems that sit across the organization, especially for a multinational, where you may not even have reporting out of certain domains. So data cleanliness, I think, is absolutely the number one issue. The good news is that we have systems, that can solve for this. We can do imputation to fill in missingness. If we don't capture everything from every region, we can go back historically and scrub. We can look for common denominators. We can normalize data. We can remove bias based on known facts about specific markets. So there's a lot of tooling that's in place for doing that, and that's not to do with generative AI at all. However, generative AI also gives us an opportunity to identify what some of those issues are, because the biggest problem with dirty data is it's not always relevant. If you have an incorrect fact and that fact sits in the middle of the bell curve, it's lost. You'll never know that it's an incorrect value, unlike outliers. So I think there's 1,000 cases like that where you can do more complex things using large language models and using a broader data corpus of unstructured data in order to inform what that cleansing process looks like.
Got it. So your recommendation is that you use a bunch of tooling that is available today to either identify the gaps in the knowledge or in the data, or identify specific overlaps where you have two data points about the same thing and they're not matching with each other, and also just do a sanity check based on general data available to the large language model or to any other model. It does not need to be an LLM. On just like do a sanity check on all the data that you are kind of processing. Is that a correct summary of?
I think so. I think there's a caveat that we all have to recognize that all data is biased in some way. There's no such thing as clean data. It just doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And so if you have that mindset going in, then the question is, what can you do to ameliorate issues that are known and even unknown inside that data set? And there's really two places that you can affect that: on the input and on the output. On the input, it's the things you're describing. What can we do in terms of best practices for data cleansing, data governance, having guardrails against our systems that understand on data ingress exactly where things might be broken, and then know that on the output there's also going to be a second chance to take a crack at making sure that you're not making a bad recommendation, you're not spewing bad language out of a chat scenario, or recommendations that would be harmful to the objectives of the organization, like recommending the competitor's product or other things that people have done for the entertainment of the internet. So we have, in Gen AI, we have a chance to sort of reset what data governance looks like, have technical tooling in place in order to enable guardrails, but also really rethink what the AI plus human scenarios are that can give you the best outcomes.
So that's very interesting. So you're saying we don't just get a chance when we're ingesting the data to actually, use tooling and guardrails and different things, but we are also getting another shot in runtime. Basically, when the prompt comes in from the user, it's not just the setup time where we have a shot, but we also have a shot at the time. Like, go deeper there for the listeners of this podcast. Like, what does that mean? Like, are you suggesting that there should be another separate set of guardrails or checking algorithms or checking LLMs that are basically just checking the responses for sanity. Is that what you mean, or is there
Yeah,
something?
well, let's take an example. So if you think about healthcare, for example, like the one way, if you think about like a typical data architecture diagram, you'll have sort of data coming in on the left, going into a system that's doing some cleansing, hitting a model that's getting trained, and then in production, it will make some kind of recommendation, and that goes out to some other system that's either delivering content, recommendation, and so forth. That's a very linear path. The reality is that once you deploy an AI system and it's in production, you've got things happening, you're actually operating in a cycle because those outcomes become the training data for the next iteration.
Yeah.
So if you think about healthcare as an example, if I go to my primary care provider and I have, a poison oak rash on my arm, and imagine now that there's an AI agent in the loop that's using computer vision in order to generate a diagnosis and prescription recommendation. My PCP should still have the opportunity to take a look at that diagnosis and make the final call.
Yeah.
And in population health, this is a big topic because we can do a lot more. We can achieve more with broader populations and have less human interaction and only escalate based on cases that really require human eyes. But I think generally the trend, and this might be, 2025, this may not be true in 10 years, but right now, most of the AI systems we see go to production are not replacing jobs or activities. They're actually giving superpowers to those that were doing those activities already so that their accuracy goes up and their velocity goes up. So overall, their impact can be greater.
Now that makes a lot of sense. So you're saying basically that you get at the output level, you're getting a chance to do a human in the loop, and you don't need to do it all the time, but maybe there can be a score, like if it's 90% confident and more, it just goes through, or 99% confident will just go through automatically. But if it's not, then a human comes in. So that will allow you to have a higher coverage for humans, and like humans can impact more lives with that process. I think that makes a lot of sense. You mentioned agents, and that's interesting because till now we've discussed mostly around knowledge being either structured knowledge or unstructured knowledge, and being able to like query that historical information of a company, right, or an organization. Let's switch the topic to agents. And I think we have Satya and Jensen talk about how they're $1 trillion opportunities, and agentic AI is the future. So what's your take on this overall? I know I read your Medium article on this as well, and I know you mentioned agentic AI as the next frontier for 2025 and beyond. So what's your take on this? What do you think? Have you seen any customers, or have you consulted with any customers on this already? And do you see anyone who's already live using agentic AI today? If yes, like what are the use cases? And if not yet, like what's your general take on the topic?
Yeah. Well, it's a great question, and actually, it makes me think of Leena because you guys are deep into this space. I think it's useful to start with some definitions, and these are evolving still too. But when we think about agents, you can think about a customer-facing agent, like a customer service agent, who's a real person. Was a real person. Now it's becoming AI that's doing the front level of what that agent is. And then there's agentic design, which I would sort of say is different because not all of those agents are going to be customer or employee facing. Those are components of the system. I was talking a second ago about the cycle of retraining. So when an AI system is in production, you generate data, you retrain on that, and hopefully you're getting tighter and tighter on accuracy. What agents, and now I'm talking about the agents that an employee or customer would interact with, what they give us an ability to do is to iterate in a much tighter cycle. Because in that example we were just talking about, where a recommendation is made and a human in the loop makes a call, you can actually use the immediate feedback in order to refine. So it's no different than how we do search today. There's a lot of information now on how people use search engines, how they expand their searches to become more specific, how they use keywords and order and language in search. And we have a much richer source now when we think about conversational agents that employees and customers are working with in order to refine and do information retrieval. But if we think about, like, if you blur your eyes a little bit at like an agentic architecture, what you're actually looking at is something that we've been talking about for years, which is microservices design.
Yep.
The reason you want to separate tasks into different agents is because that gives you the ability to monitor each. It gives you the ability to have performance metrics for each. It lets you swap different technologies in and out that are performing different things, and ultimately to refine your system based on what's there. And you can add agents, you can remove them. It gives you a very extensible approach versus having a giant black box that's trying to do it all.
Yeah, and just to add on top of it, I think one of the reasons of having separate agents do specific tasks, or smaller number of tasks, is also that it allows the orchestrator, the central agent which is deciding which agent to use, it gives that particular orchestrator the ability and the flexibility needed to string together workflows on the fly. Now, if you think about the enterprise context, that's actually really, really, really powerful, because and I have conversations with CIOs and CEOs all the time, CIOs all the time, and CTOs all the time, where I'm saying that the way you release a purchase order in your organization versus I do it versus someone else does it is a little different. It's broadly going to be similar, but it is going to be different, right? Everyone's going to have their own ways and means of doing it, right? So, and as soon as there is a variation, you need to kind of be able to give the agent the ability to just be for your organization. And the way to do it is, if I had just like a black box, as you said, that okay, on the left there comes in a request to raise a PO, and on the right just a PO comes out, right? And that you basically as an organization have no control over teaching that agent your process, right? And that's where I think the ability of breaking it down into smaller doable tasks and wrapping them up as agents kind of makes sense, because now you can have, okay, I can ground every agent in my workflows of my enterprise and kind of scale it from there for every piece of the puzzle across the entire workflow. So that's I think one of the, just like you mentioned, it gives you more control, it gives you more performance. You can check performance of every agent, you can swap things out if they're not performing well, right? And you can add and reduce whatever you want. Similarly, yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I think that's right. And also, it's the correct design. It's the correct technical design. If you all remember back to your first CS class and you're getting introduced to designing, writing object-oriented code and why you want to separate out functions. It's really no different than that. So you get all of those advantages. I would also throw in, there's a business benefit too. Like, AI is in a prove-out point now with most large organizations where there's been initial investment. Any AI project that's starting is AI 2.0, at least inside that organization. We don't really go into any clients now that they haven't already experimented with large language models and even tried to take some things into production. So that's ubiquitous across industries and so forth. And so everyone wants to create an ROI calculation. Well, the R is going to be based on some business outcome that you're going for: fewer escalations, better time to resolution, those kinds of things. The investment's going to be the time it takes to create these things, as well as the ongoing costs to maintain and put them in production, things you're paying your hyperscaler bill and so forth. I mean, you really can't do that in a granular level unless you design for it.
Yeah.
And then, the last point, I think, you mentioned being able to grow the scenario base. So if you think about like an HR scenario that someone using Leena would have, I start by asking a payroll question, and now I want to know about my benefits, which gets really specific into healthcare. Like, you can design systems that are going to, sort of satisfy specific business scenarios, and it gives you that extensibility to expand the domain of what your agent is actually doing.
Absolutely. Like, keep adding more and more integrations and agents, and just keep expanding the realm of possibilities is the name of the game in the future. Makes sense, Cameron. Now, we've talked about technology, and I think what I'm hearing from you is a lot of this is possible today, right? Agentic AI, RAG, all of that is happening in production. People are seeing it, right? I'd like to touch upon a very important topic, which is adoption of these technologies, right? I still have conversations with CEOs where they say, "Hey, we've implemented and invested so much, couple $1 million, $5 million, more than that, right? But hey, still the usage is with early adopters, or like just 10%, 15%, generally younger population." What's your advice, and what's your modus operandi? Going to a customer or a client on how do you get more people to use it in an enterprise?
Yeah, well, we work mostly with enterprise. We have a very specific and repeatable approach to that, which it goes back to what I was describing in terms of superpower. So, great AI systems help people do their jobs much better. It doesn't replace or take away jobs. Jobs will change for sure, just like word processing changed typesetting and PowerPoint changed what graphic departments did and so forth. But those jobs, didn't go away. The approach, because in most enterprises, and this isn't all enterprise, if you get into government organizations, you may have very strict sort of rules about what can be in your on your computer image and so forth. But for the most part, people are given a lot of latitude in terms of what tooling they want to use, which is great for startup founders, right? Because we get to build new things, and hopefully if they significantly outperform whatever the legacy equivalent is or the analog version, then it can be adopted. But if you can create someone, like take a sales team, and you have one person who's using generative AI in order to do some of their outreach work, their emails, their documentation, or the marketing support for that team in terms of creating product sheets and so forth. Take one case group that's basically using generative AI to do all those things, and then imagine a control group that is doing it, quote unquote, the old way. So sitting down, blank sheet, to start any of those things, blank email, you start writing to a prospect. The Gen AI team is going to outperform.
Yeah.
The case is going to beat the control.
Yeah.
So you will reject the null that AI is not going to affect the business. It does affect the business in positive ways, for sure, with all the risks and things that we were just talking about. If you do that for one person, one early adopter, and their numbers show, all of the skeptics come along. Even if it's retraining and you're moving cheese and doing all of those things, the organization will grow into that technology because of the outcome. But I think the key point, and it sounds very intuitive to say it, but it's often lost. I forget it as someone who thinks about technology a lot. It's really not about the technology. It never was. It's always about the outcome. And
Yep.
if you focused on what those KPIs are from the beginning and designing backwards, you might go in a lot of different directions than you would have expected. And maybe not all technology. Maybe you need a good AI governance body who's basically reviewing AI systems and approving them before they go to market. That might be a group of people who talk about it, people who aren't looking at a screen even. And so I think there are analog and digital ways to sort of solve for this. But really, at the end of the day, in terms of getting adoption, moving beyond early adopters, it's focusing on those business metrics, achieving the outcome, and then watching the adopters move along with the update.
Got it. So just like prove it out and move business metrics directly, and you'll see it get adopted far and wide in your organization.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah, and maybe it's just more of an entrepreneurship thing, even than an AI thing. I think that you have to understand assumptions and politics and culture and all of those things in enterprise in order to be successful, because you can make an assumption that if I can reduce call escalation to human agents by 50%, like everyone wants that.
Yeah.
It may be that the call center manager actually doesn't want that. So there are always considerations, and you have to challenge assumptions, I think, and that happens through conversations and just learning.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. So at the beginning of the podcast, you mentioned about use cases in marketing and in a couple other areas as well. So let's quickly talk more about them. So you mentioned about creating more copies via Gen AI, and that's a project you've done where you saw immediate value. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think one of the promises that tech has kind of always had for marketing is personalization, and it's something that's been talked about for a long, long time. And if you think about you and I are in the San Francisco Bay Area. If you drive down 101, you'll see a whole bunch of billboards. Anyone who's driving the 101, which is a cross section of our whole community, is going to see those. And for some people, what the message on there will be, completely irrelevant. It may not, matter to someone, payroll specialists, software. They're not going to care. So essentially, that's wasted, eyeball space and eyeball time, and therefore wasted money by that marketing person. If you think about the other extreme of that, which is massively hyper personalized content for an individual, that's extremely relevant to what that person is interested in, what they want based on the history of and information we have about that person. That's sort of where AI can take us. So in one example, we worked with a marketing team, and generative AI was used to work with unstructured data and answer questions. They could talk to their data and find out what campaigns had worked well or not. And then using that information could then feed into a different Gen AI system, which would do individualized content. So in this case, it was an ag company, and they could produce for an individual farmer an image that looked like their crop and their time of year, with mountains in the background that actually looked like geographically where that particular grower was in the world. So if you think about what that could potentially mean for marketing, it's that now if I'm making recommendations and you get into product recommending seeds and so forth, you're now blurring the lines between what traditionally has been considered advertising and marketing and what product value or consultation can look like.
Yeah.
And so you get into this gray area where now am I being marketed to, or am I actually interacting with a company in a way that's giving me value? And I think that's the exciting thing for us. If we get there, if we cross the uncanny valley of and creepy stuff that looks too personalized, but we actually get to something that is creating true value.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Who wants to listen to ads when they could be listening to content?
No, absolutely. And I've been hearing about personalized movies, right? So I don't know if you've seen those, like the movies have where they allow you to take a direction inside the movie. So you need to make a choice, like either you're going going into the fire or not going into the fire, right? And then the movie kind of has different paths to it. So it almost feels like that, but for advertising, which I think makes a ton of sense. That hey, don't sell me seeds. I have nothing to do with that, right? But yeah, if there's a tech product on Agentic AI, yeah, sign me up. You know what I mean? So
I think you can even extend that. If among your listeners there are other geeks like me, remember Dungeons and Dragons and Choose Your Own Adventure books. These are things where it felt highly customized because I'm actually making that decision. But now imagine that both the plot of that story as well as the decision points are customized. So it's not just a framework. It's actually on the fly being generated. So if you think about call centers where there might be a decision tree where we've all had to press 2 for Espanol, or press 3 for hours and locations, whatever. Like that's a very structured tree. But now if those trees are essentially being generated on the fly based on the knowledge of the caller and the probabilities of what the likely resolution might be based on what we already know before you've said anything, there's a huge opportunity to increase the value for that experience.
I think this makes sense, and it goes back to exactly where some of the internal conversation I've been having with our chief scientist, and they've been around the fact that hey, when you open up a Leena AI interaction, be it on chat, voice, wherever, right? Multimodal, as you also mentioned in your article, we know who you are and what your possible problems. So let's say you open up a Leena conversation with any of those mediums, right? So we know what laptop you are on because we're integrated with, let's say, ServiceNow or whatever application the organization uses to manage endpoints, and then we have some data coming in from that laptop itself into our systems, just general health. We know the error logs that you've been facing over the last one day. So when you're calling in or chatting or whatever, we know what those probable problems might be that you might be calling for, right? So when Cameron calls, it's a personalized conversation with Cameron, and hey, I saw you've been facing errors sending emails on Outlook. Is that what you're calling about? And boom, right? So I think that could, or even make it proactive, right? Like just call Cameron or text Cameron that hey, I see you've been facing challenges. Can I help you solve this, right? Make it more proactive, personalized to get more value to me as an end user or as a consumer, essentially.
Yeah, I think that's right. And what you described was essentially just using the data that people already have. And I think we're in a moment now where that's becoming an expectation. I shouldn't have to call in and repeat for you my phone number and my address if you have that sitting in front of you, unless for security verification. But even there's better ways to do that. I think the magic starts to happen when you tip over from facts, which is basically analytics and analysis, into probabilities, where you mentioned at the end, based on the logs from that device, we can make a pretty good guess about what the issue is that you're calling in about, and then start down that path of recommendation. And even better yet, if you know something about that machine that may happen that the user may not know themselves. So you're now becoming predictive and proactive in terms of solving issues, instead of requiring the workflow of I hit a problem and now I have to get a resolution for that problem. So the old ticket systems, that we became accustomed to, it's sort of backwards if you think about it. Why am I calling customer service for a problem that organization sort of put on me?
Absolutely. And especially when this, if you take an internal lens to this, like when I'm an employee, like it's your job to make sure everything is working, right? I need to do my work, right, and do my best work. And why am I having to solve the IT issues or the HR or finance issues that I'm having, right? Like solve it for me, right? I think that's what we've been hearing from our end customers all the time, and that's what our investments have been as well. But
Yeah.
great to see that you have the same lens from an outside perspective on what customers and users are going to be expecting out of AI experiences.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's productivity. It's a business outcome that we're focused on. If Leena can make it so that we don't have to call in for password resets anymore, that would be a huge win. Just that one scenario. Imagine the lost productivity.
Yeah. So even today, one of the biggest use cases is password resets. I don't know why, but yeah, it is still there. Love it. Cameron, towards the last leg of our conversation today, I'd love to understand. So you're also a GP, a general partner at the fund Oxonian Ventures, right? So as an investor, as a general partner, what are you seeing in the world of Gen AI? What are you seeing? What exciting things people are building in agentic AI or in multimodal AI? What's it that's happening? Just for our listeners to know what's coming next.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you one thing we're not seeing anymore is AI companies. And the reason I say that is because I would expect anyone who's starting a company right now to have some format of AI integrated into their offering. And that's true both of services and product. It's true of SaaS. It's true of consumer devices. It's true of hardware. So across the board, every company is an AI company.
Yeah.
There are cases where we hear pitches and we'll ask about competitive differentiation, and the founder will say, but ours has AI. It's like, yeah, no, that's not going to work because it's available. It's the accessibility, and it's what the platform, specifically AWS, GCP, and Azure, enabling for everyone. If you have data, you can have AI, and you actually don't even need to hire an AI team in order to build that. That's becoming a commodity even if you think about the race right now between LLM providers, foundation model providers. So that's definitely a trend. Well, what are you left with? And this is, I think, something we'll see in 2025, 2026, is massive verticalization into specific industries where now the knowledge or more accurately, the data that AI is being trained on is targeted at a very specific scenario in that vertical. So if you think about precision medicine as an AI scenario, I was at the JPM conference in San Francisco yesterday. Lots of talk about personalized care pathways and precision medicine. If you think of the example I was talking about with marketing, that can be applied directly to a clinical setting where you're making diagnosis and recommendation. In agriculture, precision agriculture is also a term that's being thrown around a lot at conferences. Where now I can make recommendations about pesticides and fertilizers and seeds that go down to the soil level, and I can do different things on different sides of a hill, and the machinery all will respond and take that input and and take care of it. So I think the short answer to your question on it is verticalization. And so that this, kind of goes back to the thesis I think I keep hitting on, which is like, if you focus on the business outcome and then back into the tooling and technology, you're probably much better off than having a hammer, with AI or something that's, you mentioned, trying to create the platform, one thing for everyone, and it ends up being for no one. Really solving a problem, like a critical problem, and using the knowledge that founders have around AI tooling in order to deliver that solution.
No, I think great answer. That's exactly where, that's exactly where I am too. Like, I think you can't just say that, hey, we are a better CRM because we have AI. Every CRM is going to have AI, right? I do feel though there is a way of building AI, like just reimagine how a CRM could be, grounds up with AI, right? But that is going to be really hard, right? Like, you need to have extreme amounts of insight into a specific industry, and those founders have a very big advantage of. But you have to be like AI first, like reimagine every single thing, um, of that particular product. But you have to also have a core insight, like for example a core insight. And it's pretty funny. I was actually talking to a founder yesterday on this, is that nobody likes to log in into Salesforce or HubSpot, like, like I don't know, it become too complex, right? There's so many things that are happening, right? Maybe, just maybe, there is a way of reimagining this in a way where, I just get to see a very simple, like less is more kind of a. There might be complex workflows, etc., going on at the back, but nobody gets to see. I get to see what I just have right there, and that's it, right? Like, I never interface with a very complex UI ever again. That could be, but again, you need to have a core insight that will drive some of that next generation of app building. Because if you look at it, there were two, like the platform shifts that happened, right? One was without, like the first one was just having access to databases and servers, so you got applications in the first place, right, on prem, but yeah, still you got applications. The second big one was to move to the cloud, and I think the third one, which is now, is AI. So you could see, like, I definitely see, like Leena AI, someone like Leena AI going and disrupting a ServiceNow, a Zendesk, an old school ITSM forever. Like, they never needed, hopefully, right? But yeah, so there has to be a core, like an insight on all of these applications. I do think there's going to be the next level of CRMs, HRIS, ITSM, all of them being created over the next decade or so.
Yeah, I think the biggest mistake technologists, and your question came from Oxonian Ventures, so we see a lot of we focus on early stage, we're industry agnostic, but the biggest mistake that technologists make is that people want to use technology. And actually, if you talk to salespeople, they don't want to work with the CRM, because when they're working with the CRM and inputting data, they're not actually on a call with a prospect. And so it's something that Leena has correct. I think it's something that the whole, I'll say the valley, but really the industry, is that we all want to be sitting and looking at our phones. We all want to be clicking buttons in software, and it's just not true. People are trying to get to the resolution. They're not trying to have the interaction.
Absolutely. I think that right there is the insight that if founders have, they'll start in the right way. I think we made the same mistake ourselves. I told you the Chatteron story when we were connecting earlier, but that's exactly where it is, right? So as when we were starting Chatteron, it was just we love this technology, let's go and give it to people. And I think that's the exact wrong way. As you said, it's not like people are sitting around just to want to chat with the assistant, right? They want to get things done. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, and you can even take things like psychological support chat bots or companion chat bots. There is still some goal to that interaction, and our job is to help people efficiently get to that goal.
It makes a lot of sense. I think that was my last question, and thank you so much, Cameron, for doing this for us. I really enjoyed our 40 minutes together, and I'd love to host you sometime again in the future. But thank you so much for doing this for our listeners today.
Likewise, thank you so much, Adit, and good luck.
Thank you.